We are into week 4 of the pandemic lockdown. And a lot of councils have responded to that by stopping the garden waste collection service, and they've reprioritised it, so garden waste can be regarded as a bit of a low priority. But the problem is, now that we're into spring, gardens growing, what on earth do you do with all the weeds that you've pulled up, all the grass that you've cut, and the branches that you've chopped back? Well, what we're going to do is just try to encourage you to set up a compost bin and give a little bit of advice as to what to do and what to put into it, but also talk a little bit about your kitchen waste as well. Now, a basic rule about kitchen waste or food waste is that, frankly, you shouldn't have any. If you've got food leftovers, you should be eating it yourself, turning it into something that can be another meal, but certainly usable food should not be thrown out. Now, there'll be some things which you produce from the kitchen which is not edible food, so things like randomly thinking onion skins, banana skins, stuff like that, fine to go into your compost bin. But if you've got something like unused food, maybe cheese, bread, that has gone past its sell-by date, check it out. Most of the time it's still usable. You don't need to be throwing it out. So, not the prettiest of sights, but this is our compost bucket. This is where we put day to day the waste from the kitchen which we can't consume or eat ourselves. So, as I said, it's a little bit of stuff such as onion skins and so on, banana peel. Orange and lemon peel doesn't go into here because that gets made into marmalade. What we also put in with our kitchen waste are things like bits of cardboard, so toilet roll holder, and newspapers as well. And we don't put the newspapers in whole. We put them in sheet by sheet, scrunch it up, because if you put in too much together, it slows down the decaying process. It's just too much paper in one big clump. It just means that the bacteria and the worms and so on just don't sufficiently and speedily chew it all up and break it down. But what we also do in our kitchen is, here's my bucket again, you might just be able to see in there that there's an awful lot of liquid. And basically what we do is put in things like any sort of half-drunk cups of tea, any pots of coffee that we haven't finished, liquid like that, and also if you wash things like your potatoes in a bowl of water, pour that in as well. It's all sort of stuff that is good for the soil. And what the water does, the liquid does, is help keep the compost moist so that the worms and the bugs are able to break it down a lot quicker. So that lot is about to go into our compost bin that we keep at the bottom of our garden. Now, these two compost bins we've got at the bottom of our garden are properly made. They were bought as compost bins. I'll show you in a moment about how to make your own compost bin. But we keep two together, one side, each side by side, and this one here is the one that we have in operation at the moment. Everything in that bin is currently rotting down, although this one here is nearly full. So I'm going to, as you can see, there's reasonable amount of waste in there. We've got stuff like cardboard which is rotting down gradually as well. So we'll put in the newspaper that we just finished with and everything from the bucket. As you can see, there's an awful lot of tea leaves in there as well. something not to put into your compost bin is meat waste, animal product waste. Best to avoid that, particularly with bones. There is actually an alternative use for the bones. If you've got, say, chicken bones or pork, bones from a pork joint or something like that, when you've extracted all the meat, obviously then boil the bones to make a stock, and then dry the bones out in the oven a few times over. You don't have to put the oven on especially for them, just put them at the bottom, on a tray at the bottom of the oven. Every time it's used for over, say, a week or so, it helps dry out the bones and makes them brittle. And then you get all the bones, get a mallet, smash them all to bits, and what you're left with is a bone meal. And then you can use that as a fertiliser. It's a slow release fertiliser, but you scatter that on your flower beds or your vegetable beds, but don't put them in your compost bin. Right, if you can get one of these that I'm next to now, it's perfect as a garden compost bin. These are crates that gardening companies and building firms end up throwing out because they are used for carrying paving stones. And of course, once the job is done, once the paving stones are laid, then these are no longer any use to the builders, but for gardeners and allotment holders and smallholders like me, we love these things. So just ask your friendly local building firm if they've got any that they want to give away. And these are perfect. It's wide and shallow, so it's much easier to get your bigger, bulkier waste into, rather than the compost bin that you have for your kitchen waste. So what can you put into your garden waste compost bin? Well, it's basically anything that you would have been putting into your council green waste bin. And one thing to watch out for, though, is that if you are putting in sticks and branches, when the council takes away that waste, it normally gets ground up to make it into much smaller pieces that go into their waste stream, and then that's all composted down. If you're putting whole sticks into your compost bin, then frankly it's going to slow down the process for composting your material. Sorry, I'm being invaded by my goats at the moment. So this is Perky, and here is snow, and this is snow here. Right. Obviously, as a smallholder, then we are dealing with more than just garden waste here. We're dealing with the muck that we get from the animals, and we put that. We let that rot down in sacks for about 3 weeks, and then we put it onto the land to improve the soil quality. So, if you've got lots of sticks into your compost, it will slow down the composting rate. Or the rotting down rate. So the best thing to do is to see if you can get your hands on a shredder. If not, then it's probably best to put your sticks to one side, unless they're very thin sticks. So something like the sort of the thickness of your finger, like that. Anything above that, then you're probably looking at needing to get that shredded. And if not, then I think it just has to go to one side until the council reinstitutes the garden waste collection. Anyway, I'm next to a compost bin that we built a few years ago now on part of our smallholding, and it's been bashed about a bit by the goats, but it's got a really good quality compost in it. And this was built from planks of wood that we were able to salvage from old pallets. But as you can see, the quality of the soil, of the compost rather, is really good here. There's a few twigs in it which we didn't manage to shred before the composting process started, so that is that needs to be put through a sieve, a big garden sieve, to take the twigs out. If you keep pets such as rabbits and guinea pigs, then it's probably better not to go putting the bedding waste and muck from them into your compost bin along with your kitchen waste or your garden waste. Keep it separate, mainly because what you don't want to do is to be putting compost made from manure onto things like salad crops if you're growing things like lettuces or radishes or other vegetables like that which you are eating raw. And they're fine. That compost though is fine if you've got crops such as potatoes or rhubarb. Fine with them, but not with something that you'd be eating raw. This is a compost heap as opposed to a compost bin, which we have on our small holding, and this is made up entirely of the waste produced from growing vegetables. So it's things like weeds that we've pulled up, old herbs, which this lot is, it's died and dried off, and so on. And what we do is we put it into a big heap like this, and it's warmer and moister in the middle of it, but that means it rots down fairly well. So if you can't build a bin, a compost bin, this is what you could think of trying instead. So this is what we've got in the compost heap. Obviously discard the twigs, but we've got a good rich compost there, and because it doesn't have any animal waste in it, that can go on just about anything that you are planting up in your garden or want to grow in pots. But remember, if you keep animals such as rabbits and guinea pigs, keep their waste separate. This is a commercially produced compost bin. They don't cost very much. I think we got this a few years ago, and I think it costs about 10 quid. Get them from your garden centres. Now I know garden centres at the minute aren't really open because of the pandemic, but if you want to sort of save money going into the future, then go to your local DIY centre, get one of these or make one from old pallets. The advantage with this one is that it's fully sealed around the edge, so it's good for your kitchen waste and all that moisture that we put in that we were showing earlier as well. So in this one we have actually just been using this for garden waste, and I'm going to show you what it's like inside. So this is what we've got inside. A nice rich compost, suitable for just about anything, from potting up tomatoes to producing a good rhubarb crop. To dismantle it, these sections just come apart. We'll be using the compost from both that bin and that heap on our small holding for when we are growing salad crops, but we'll also use it in our greenhouse and polytunnels as well. Okay everybody, quick question. Which of these two items can go into the compost bin? Used tea bags or wood ash? Well, the answer is the wood ash can go into the compost bin as long as it's been burnt in a stove that burns only untreated wood. If you're burning wood that's been treated with paint or with preservative, or if you're burning coal at the same time with the wood, then you cannot put the wood ash into your compost bin. But if it's burnt as pure wood without being treated, as long as it's dry wood, then the resulting ash can go into the compost bin, or it can go straight onto the the ground, onto your vegetable or fruit flower beds, because actually it's a good fertiliser in its own right. If you do put it into the compost bin, mix it up with other things though, to make sure that there's not a concentrate of it. These things can't go into the compost bin because they're full of plastic fibres, and those fibres will not rot down. So if you put the tea bags into your compost, while everything else rots down, they'll still be there, and they'll end up getting consumed by wildlife, and they can kill, or they can build up in the food chain and eventually end up being consumed by us. So it's a definite no-no. Don't put tea bags into the compost bin. In fact, don't buy tea bags. Get loose leaf tea. It's cheaper, it uses fewer resources, and it's much better for the environment. So, why have a compost bin? Well, financially, it's much more sensible because you don't have to pay the council to take away your waste. And secondly, you won't have to buy compost. If you're buying compost from your garden, you could actually be making it free from waste. So, double saving there. But also, each time the council comes to take away your waste, you, as council taxpayers, or as local taxpayers, have to pay for that anyway. So if we can reduce the cost of that, then we all benefit. But there are strong environmental reasons for turning your garden and kitchen waste into compost as well. Just think about all the miles and miles that a whole fleet of lorries from the council has to drive to collect all your waste. And those lorries typically are run on diesel. So that's a fossil fuel that it's burning just to go around to collect waste, which you could actually turn into compost in your own garden. So we have a saving in terms of the environment there, but also whenever you buy compost, you've got to drive to the DIY centre to pick it up. So you're putting up the carbon footprint of it. It comes with its own packaging. It has to have been shipped in from outside as well. It all comes at an environmental cost. So turning your waste, your kitchen waste and your garden waste into compost helps us to protect the environment.